This conference will now be recorded.
Well, hello everyone. Jay Berkowitz and a whole bunch of friends and experts, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to mute everyone else for now, and then we'll unmute the speakers as we get to them. And I want, a special thank you to all of our experts for making their predictions, and we'll introduce them in just 1 minute. Our schedule today, our agenda, is to define the future of digital technology and talk about things like artificial intelligence and Bitcoin and blockchain and the Internet of Things. And the real business purpose is to talk about how do we apply these things? How do we apply these strategies for design and business? And I'm also going to define what I think is the next breakout social media, not TikTok. So with that said, here's our order of speakers. I'm going to go first, followed by David Meerman Scott, Bruce Turkel, Mitch Joel, Chelsey Maas, Richard Kane, Joe Jaffe, Peter Shankman, Frankie, and Dennis. And that, I thought I'd go first so I can sort of set the tone and explain how we want to do this. And I apologize because I'm sort of muting people so that we can manage our sound. So I'm Jay Berkowitz, and I wrote the 10 Golden Rules of Online Marketing 16 years ago. And I've written a couple other books, including my new book called Digital Future. And I'll share with you a little bit of my future predictions today. And 16 years ago, I also launched an agency called 10 Golden Rules. And we're a digital marketing agency based in Boca Raton, Florida. And we merged with our partner Snap Agency in Minneapolis. And you'll meet Chelsey, our creative director, today. So my 3 predictions. The first one is artificial intelligence enters the realm of search. And speech recognition is now so good that computers are beating human transcribers with only a 5% error rate. And it may be a little bit frustrating when we're asking Siri, what's the best restaurant in Times Square? But for the most part, Siri is now better, and Alexa is now better than a human transcriber. So it's getting really, really good. And so we're starting to do a vast majority of our search by asking questions. And so that's really changing Google and changing search engine optimization. So Google's been working in the background to rewrite their algorithms to understand human language. They had an update called RankBrain, and the new update is called BERT, which is short for Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers. But essentially what that means is it's natural language processing. It's a machine trying to understand what the words in a sentence mean and understand the nuance of context. According to Google, BERT's the most important update in 5 years, and it's impacting 10% of queries. But what that all means is something we've been talking about for a long time, and what Google's been trying to encourage us to do, is to write for humans and not the search engines. And the strategy we've been taking with our clients for a few years now is just answering questions. And this is Marge, and she's the receptionist at one of our clients at a law firm. But really what we're talking about here is taking a list. We give Marge a little clipboard, and all of the intake professionals in your organization or your sales department, your customer service. And the strategy is to try and capture as many questions as you can, and then answer those questions in the form of articles and blogs on the search engine. And that's the best way you can write for the search engine. And if you're really, really successful, you'll accomplish this rich snippet. And this is a new thing that Google's introduced, that when you answer the question to Google's determination, the best of anyone, you get this little box that says, hey, here's the answer to our question, and that's called out on the search. So it becomes very, very powerful because there's 10 SEO results on a page, and you're now coming up in what we're calling position 0 in the industry, where you're actually on top of the 10 SEO results. So answering questions is a great way to take advantage of search. The next trend that I'm suggesting is blockchain for business. Now, we've been hearing about Bitcoin and blockchain, but essentially, blockchain is the technology that Bitcoin is built on. And when Satoshi Nakamoto, who still is yet to be determined who that is or what that person was, when he wrote the Bitcoin white paper over 10 years ago, he wrote it in this language called blockchain. And the city of Zug is using blockchain for voting, voter ID registration. Veeam is using blockchain for payments to the tune of over $100 million a month. And from a business perspective, blockchain is becoming very important in manufacturing, with smart contracts replacing bills of lading, securities trading, and governments are using blockchain, starting to use them for title recordings and e-voting. So if you're in one of these industries, you want to start investigating what's the opportunity for smart contracts in your industry. And my third prediction is the next breakout social media. And it's not TikTok, but it's actually Google Maps. Now, you're probably thinking, what does Google Maps have to do with social media? Well, Google Maps allows people to host, and the host, or if I own my Google Maps, or what Google calls Google My Business, I can post my own pictures, photos, and videos. I can answer questions, and visitors to my social media page, my Maps page, can ask and answer questions. There's reviews like any other social media, and I can update it with posts. Here's the biggest clue that Google is treating this as their new social media. They've actually started adding a follow button on Google Maps addresses. So what can you do to take advantage of this? Well, you can use all these tools and think of Google Maps like you would think of search engine optimizing your website, where as the host, you can update with videos and photos. You can make sure you get lots and lots of reviews and get people to ask questions and answer those questions. And most importantly, set a calendar and update with regular posts on your Google My Business. The algorithm for Google My Business is really closely tied to the SEO algorithm. And when we see for our clients, when the SEO is improving for a client and we're doing a lot of work on the Google My Business or the Google Maps, the Google Maps traffic is increasing as well. So take advantage of the new social media / SEO that Google is merging on the Maps functionality. So my three predictions: number one, artificial intelligence for search. Answer questions on your SEO. Number two, explore blockchain for business. And number three, Google My Business as a social media. So David's up next. David, I think that's you. Oh, you should be unmuted now.
Okay, so are you going to push the slides for me here, Jay?
Yeah, sure. You can
All
just
right, great.
say go.
Yeah,
Now,
okay, go ahead.
I was going to do a quick introduction. So,
Oh, please.
David is awesome. I've had the chance to hang out with him and see him speak. He speaks all around the world. He's written a bunch of books, and his newest one he's going to tell us about, called Fanocracy. But one of the things that really stood out to me very early on, probably over 10 years ago with David, is he was one of the first guys that really took advantage of putting out free, awesome resources. Like the new rules of PR, which became the new rules of marketing and PR, was downloaded tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of times. And
millions,
really,
actually.
Millions of times.
Yeah.
And made David really, really famous in the early days, over 10 years ago, of digital expertise, if you will. So with that, I'll turn it over to David for his predictions.
Great. Hey, thank you, Jay. And also, it's nice to see a bunch of friends, smiling faces here, Mitch and Bruce and others. Hello, everybody. So you're right, Jay. The new rules of marketing and PR came out back in 2007. And at that time, many of us who were involved in social media and online communications that early, everything sounded so wonderful, and it was. You could communicate with your friends, you could reach potential customers, and The social networks, if you push the button, everybody saw what you pushed out there. But I think that the promise of social media, which we were all experiencing, say, 10 or 15 years ago, has yielded to darkness. If you could advance the slide one, we've got digital chaos going on now. There's disruption out there. You know, the social networks themselves are no longer optimized to allow you to reach your friends and your potential and existing customers. They're optimized for profit. The algorithms are such that it's really difficult to reach people. And you've got fake news, you've got the polarization of the whole world out there. The political world, especially online, is incredibly polarized. Sometimes you don't even know if you're communicating with a robot. So I believe really strongly that the pendulum has swung too far in the direction of superficial online communications at a time when we're all hungry for a true human connection. I think right now, the end of 2019, the end of the 20 teens, we are now ready for the pendulum to swing back in the 2020s to a genuine human connection. A genuine human connection. And to me, that genuine human connection is the idea of fandom. And I've been researching fandom now for 5 years. I researched fandom because I, 5 years ago, thought to myself, I am a massive fan of the Grateful Dead. You can see evidence of it all over my office, including my original Grateful Dead road case that was used for 850 concerts in the 1980s and 1990s. Yes, I'm a Grateful Dead geek. I've seen them 75 times. I've also seen live music 780 times. I have a spreadsheet to prove it. And my daughter, Reiko, 26 years old now, huge Harry Potter fan, has written a 90,000 word alternative ending to the Harry Potter series where Draco Malfoy is a spy for the Order of the Phoenix, put it on a fan fiction site. It's been downloaded thousands of times and has hundreds of comments. So we're both huge fans of things. And so we collaborated on this new book called Fanocracy. And if you could advance, Fanocracy is the idea that fans rule. Fanocracy is the idea that human connections are incredibly important. Fanocracy is turning fans into customers and customers into fans. It's the idea that any organization can tap fandom. Fandom is not just for entertainers anymore. It's for any organization that truly digs into developing human relationships with customers and potential customers. And next slide, please. So this idea of the pendulum is we've swung too far in the direction of superficial online communications. If you add a genuine human connection into that, then that pendulum will swing back. It'll swing back to a fanocracy. It'll swing back to a situation where fans rules. And that is no doubt what I'm seeing for the 2020s. So thanks, Jay. I'm really interested to hear what my colleagues have to say about their predictions.
Thanks, David. I'm just going to get Bruce's slides up, and we'll go to Bruce Turkel next. Hey, Bruce, you should have audio.
Okay.
And 2 seconds for slides. Okay, put Bruce in. So, all right, so Bruce and I get to hang out a lot. He's based in Miami, and we're a member of a group. We get to go to some really great locations and parties and events. And when the sort of crap hits the fan, if you will, for a brand. Bruce is called in by major networks to comment on that. He's been behind amazing brands like Miami and more. And today Bruce does a lot of speaking, and he's on to his fifth book. And without further ado, let's get Bruce's predictions.
So thank you, Jay. Because of the TV work I do, I've had to take lots of classes in presenting, and they always tell you that you never want to present after children or puppies. I would suggest that if you want to sound smart, you never want to present after my friend David Meerman Scott. So I'm kind of hoping that I can keep up, especially because you asked us specifically to talk about 3 predictions. Next slide, please. And I thought about that a lot, and it turned out that I'm only going to make 1 prediction, but it has 3 very, very important elements. Slide, please. And it is the synchronicity of 3 things. IT there is Internet of Things. AI is, of course, artificial intelligence, and SM is social media. We know about all those things, but for some reason, we haven't figured out that they're all going to work together. You can go on to the next slide. That's fine. So our phones that take pictures of everything, all of these security cameras that are everywhere, Alexa and the Apple House device, and our Nests and our watches and our tablets, we are constantly recording all of this data. Well, what happens when AI and the Internet of Things connects all of these is they are going to be posted on social media without us. It's going to happen, and we're going to have nothing to do with it, but it's going to happen 24/7, 365. Next slide, please. And before you say, well, it doesn't really matter if they post pictures, they're not going to know what's going on. They're going to know everything that's going on. Facial recognition, they're going to know who you are and who you're with. Geotagging will know where you are. And of course, because we've all linked our calendars to the web, it's going to know what you're doing. And if you hit the button again, it's also, there will be content audits because the devices will be looking at our blogs, our social media posts, our profiles, our spending history through our credit reports. So basically, the system will know your opinions. It will know where you are. It will know what you're doing. Now, I'm not suggesting simply that this is a big brother sort of thing. You can take that if you want. But what I am suggesting is that we are going to be posted all the time. And here's why it matters. We are going to be removed from the process while our involvement is exponentially increased. Think about that. You're not going to have to post. I don't post currently on Facebook, but my wife does. So I run into friends and they'll say, hey, I saw you were in Cartagena, or I saw you were in Traverse City, Michigan. And I used to wonder, how the hell do you know that? But now I know because my wife posts all these photographs. Well, now the system is going to do it without you. Therefore, what should you do? Number 1, get your environments ready. We are looking right now here on WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever we're on at everybody's background. And I would suggest that some of us have art directed our backgrounds and some of us haven't. We better start doing that. Number 2, you better build a personal brand that's going to be recognizable because it's going to be out there. It's going to be promoted. The question is, are you going to be controlling what it looks like, or are other people going to be controlling it, or other algorithms? Number 3, be very careful about what you post, where you are, what information is accessible. When I was much younger and my son was much younger, he posted a picture of him and some friends at a party holding up bottles of liquor with their tongues out. And I had to explain to him that although that's very funny when you're 14 years old, it's not going to be so funny when you go to apply for a job and somebody finds it. Well, that reality is now here. Point 4, did I say that we need to prepare our environments for more promotion that's going to happen when we're not around? Well, if you didn't hear me say it for point 1, I want to say it again because it's critical. You need to design your environments so that these passive photographs say what you want them to say. Passive videos as well, of course. And number 5, here's the good news. There is going to be incredible opportunity to guide companies and individuals on how they can deal with these opportunities and how to capitalize them. So that brings up 2 questions. Question number 1, Jay, hit the slide. Thank you. Branding is going to change from active to passive. We used to believe that we controlled our brands. Big companies would hire people like me to build their brands, to build their messaging strategy, to build their positioning, to build their visual languages. But now they're not going to need that unless they're smart enough to realize that it's going to be out there anyways, and they better hire all of us and all of the folks who are on this webinar to be able to control those things. And then hit the button again, please. We have to ironically understand how to get active about our brand development, which is about to become passive. And it seems to me that that's such an enormous paradigm shift that it's going to take a whole lot more than 5 minutes on a webinar, but we all need to be thinking about this. Thank you very much, Jay, and I'm thrilled to hear what everyone else has to say. We can't hear you, Jay. You're muted.
We'll figure out how to do the slides in 2029 before the 2030 predictions letter. All right, Mitch Joel's going to be up next. So, Mitch, I just have to unmute you.
I think I'm unmuted.
You're good, yeah. I'll give you slides. Chelsey, you're on deck, just so you know. All right, you should be good to go, Mitch.
Well, thanks for that great intro, Jay.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. I'm gonna do the intro.
I'll go. I
think the attendees are getting the feeling this is kind of like old home week. A bunch of us hang out and speak at conferences, and Mitch and I have been hanging out for 10, 12 years at different events and conferences, and he's come down here to Florida and spoken to our events, and he's spoken at TEDx, and you know, he's one of the real rock stars. And one of the things that I admire most about Mitch is I think every single week, maybe he's missed one or two, but he has cranked out a podcast called 6 Pixels of Separation that is phenomenal. You got to listen to it. He talks to all the most influential people and authors in the industry. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mitch.
Thanks so much, Jay. Good to be here. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to be sort of different than what people like Bruce and David or even you have said to date, but I'm taking a bit of a different perspective. We can go ahead and move forward, Jay. You know, the first thing I should say is I'm one of those people that really, really hate people who self-quote themselves. So here we go. I actually just took quotes and just changed them around a little bit, but they're mine. Half the data I have is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. You can forward to the next one, which is a sort of play off of the old advertising adage that I know that half of my advertising works. I just don't know which half. I think that we're faced with the same problem right now in data, and I don't know if this is a prediction for 2020 or just a prediction going forward. As someone who's been spending, you know, close to 3 decades in the media space, 20 years in the agency space, I just don't think I've really seen a product or service that requires more than 5 to 10 data points from a consumer to understand if they're a customer. And we live in this strange world where we've sort of normalized all of this collection of data and where it sits and how it moves. And I don't necessarily know that consumers are going to be sophisticated enough to push back, but I think brands are going to be realizing increasingly and more how much of a liability this actually is to have on the spreadsheet. All of this information that actually is not actionable, that they're not able to convert these people into customers, or that even customers that are existing in the data that they're collecting doesn't really enhance or really up the bucket in terms of pushing sales forward. And the truth is, I'm just sort of looking at this world now that I'm post-agency life and just saying to myself, wow, these brands have so much information and they really do suck. Like, they just have an inability to truly communicate and connect with the customer. And I really think that it's been this sort of weird arms race for more and more data. So prediction number 1 is to think very strategically about what you're collecting, what you need to collect, and what ultimately leads to the most important thing, which isn't how big your data set is, but rather how much of these people are actually customers and repeat customers and coming back more and more. The next prediction I would tell you about is another sort of self-quote that I sort of spun off out of Star Wars. I've been watching The Mandalorian, which I haven't loved, to be honest. I thought it'd be a lot better. These clicks are not the clicks you're looking for. If you advance to the next slide, it's really interesting to me that we live in a world where clicks still matter. Clicks suck, clicks don't work, they never had. And that's just the reality of the world we live in. We live in this world where brands are sort of polarized by this idea of lead generation on one side and brand building on the other. And you would think that from a strategic standpoint, what actually makes a brand effective is a sort of 50-50 split between the two, which I actually think is the right formula. And it's probably been proven time and time again when you study real brands that are spending across both platforms, what's working. And I really do think that 50-50 in terms of doing lead gen and brand building is important. And yet we live in a world where most brands are probably doing 90+% on lead gen, which is just sort of bad click after bad click. Brands just want clicks. And the reason is they want to move fast. And what they don't necessarily really understand is that to build a true brand takes time. And working on the brand side of things isn't an experience of sort of repetition. It's this experience of building the BX, the brand experience. And so we live in a world where everybody is hyper excited about the customer experience or the consumer experience. In fact, many people believe that the consumer experience is surpassing marketing. And I just don't believe that to be true. I think that if you want to be strong going forward, and this is the tactical part of this prediction, it's understand where your brand is and what it stands for. Understand what the brand experience is, and then understand what the customer experience is. Focus all your time and energy on making sure that there's that symphony between the three. I think otherwise you're sort of failing if all you're focused on is the customer experience, because ultimately when that happens, it looks like all brands are doing is chasing clicks, and clicks suck. So let's go on to number 3 and my last one, which is big media. I think that we are, you can hop to the next slide, Jay. I think that we are living in a world where Facebook and social media have really had their impact be that they're impacting in a dramatic way traditional media business models. And what we're seeing, I think, is a world where, rightfully so or not, traditional media and government are taking big shots at big digital media. And I don't necessarily know that I see a connective tissue between what the media is saying and what politicians are saying and what consumers are saying. If you look at the consumer side of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you want it to be, YouTube, Google, people are not leaving in droves. People are not complaining that, oh, look at what they're doing with my data and I can't believe my data now resides on the dark web. They're actually using these platforms more and more. They're trying to figure out ways to monetize it more and more. And if you look at the sort of shifting landscape of where advertising dollars are, they're moving more and more to these platforms as well, because advertising dollars follow where the users are. So as much as I believe that there's problems and regulation and government intervention required on the big platforms, the average consumers are just not really there yet. And what I would urge everybody to think about is read these articles that you're hearing about how bad these digital platforms are with a grain of salt in understanding, to a certain degree, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, that the people who are writing and creating these articles are the ones who have been in the most pain from these new business models. And it's an important thing to understand. We need to have freedom of journalism. My background is in journalism. I love publishing. I used to publish magazines before the internet existed. But I see a lot of these articles that look at being essentially hatchet jobs on a lot of platforms or individuals who lead these platforms. And I'm not saying it's unfair or unjust. I'm not saying that. It's just that you have to remember that these big media companies have the most to gain by that. So because of that, I would just encourage you all to understand that as consumers, there's a lot of excitement still around digital platforms and a lot of things that will happen. Be cognizant of how your data is being used, but also be highly skeptical of what you're reading in the mass media about what's happening. And so I think that for brands, they have to understand that there is going to be a backlash and a distrust, even more so, of traditional mass media and obviously what we're seeing in political sphere, and that we have to understand that from a tactical view, what that means to be a brand. So again, thanks, Jay, for the opportunity, and I hope that this all conjures up some better conversation.
Thanks, Mitch. That's great. Always thought-provoking and excellent. Okay, Chelsey, you're probably sitting with Dylan. So if I unmute, does that give you audio? No. There we go.
How about now?
Yep, that's good.
Dylan is not with me. He's sitting in a different room. So it's just me.
All right. Well, so my intro. So I've gotten to know Chelsey over the last year or so. We merged with an agency called Snap Agency in Minneapolis. And what I love about Chelsey is her design is beautiful and effective. So when we bring something to a client, it looks spectacular and it works. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chelsey, our creative director at Snap Agency.
Thanks, Jay. It's kind of funny listening to what Mitch had to say earlier and how clicks are bad. I agree with him to some extent. My predictions for 2020 are really all about how websites are changing from a UX UI perspective. I think Bruce talked about how brands, really, the brand experience really needs to be there as well as the customer experience, and Mitch touched on this as well too. But the website still needs to exist. It's your digital presence really is where you push all of your assets to, whether it's social media or paid or email or whatever channel you're pushing to. You always push back to your website. Everyone asks for a website, you need to have a website. But that being said, there is different ways that I see technology changing to make the interface of a website look and feel different than it is today. So without further ado, so my 3 predictions, and I'll break them down here, is my first one is rediscovering your CTA. So I know that buttons are boring and buttons don't work, but I do think that's because the current use of a call to action or a button or a link even is rather boring and generic. So it's if you want to go ahead one more, Jay, diving in deep here, it's all about kind of taking that learn more, that really underperforming link, and expanding it out. So taking it, and it's very dry to just see a learn more link and not exactly know what's behind that. When you're on a beautiful website, the interface could be beautiful, but if the navigation's not there, if it's not driving you anywhere, then it is underperforming. It's very overused. You see any sort of blog, even like larger sites like CNN and Fox and all sorts of other news type of things, still use read more and learn more, and it's just not working. So the click-through rates have been plummeting because of that. So they're not being engaging users enough to then click more into it. So if you want to go one more. Having thought about this in 2020, I do see call to actions really being more defined and personalized. The first one is using the keywords that describe the link's action. So it's not just learn more, it's learn about this. So there's an example down below that says, get my unlimited pass. This was from a gym or a yoga studio. So it's not just learn more or get started or buy now. It's more get your free pass so you know what's behind door number 1. Door number 2 is converting that information into the actual click itself. So we're seeing a lot of this happen with more of a grid system. So you look at portfolio websites that have, architecture or case studies, and they're really in this visual grid that you can click the entire box, not just the link. Making a larger click area makes it easier for someone, especially on a mobile or a tablet device, to be able to click through to that next step or that next page. The third option to improve your call to action would be to retain the learn more, but add more on top of that. So there's different visual ways, like hover is really great use of this. Here's a terrible use in terms of Samsung. Sorry, Samsung. But just the learn more with an arrow, that's exactly what you should not do. What you should do instead is learn more about X. So if it's describing what you're actually going to, this is really great when you're looking at pages that have a lot of different options on your home page or on your service top level pages. Those pages, you have a bunch of different options that you want user to go to, and helping them choose the right one, that's all within the call to action as well as the header, but the call to action really is prompting them to that next step. So those are 3 options from a call to action perspective. My second prediction is non-traditional interfaces. So I think 2019 is going to be the last year that you see that full width carousel slider that has the multiple images that take about 3 seconds to go through. Gone are the days of that. So also with Bootstrap. Bootstrap is that 12 column grid that, everything is, kind of squared out and column wise. I think we're past that. So 2020 is going to bring in some really beautiful interfaces. You can go to the next slide, Jay. So for example, the first trend I see happening is that we're going to see more white space. And what I mean by white space is not just white space. Granted, my examples are all white, but more of the space between elements. It's not everyone, the perception, at least in 2018 and 2019 was, oh, if I have all this white space, I have to scroll to the next item. So they almost saw it as wasted space. However, having that space and having the comfortable padding around a certain element does bring the eye directly to it and calls contrast to it. So and actually end up encouraging someone to be interested in that element. You can go to the next one. The second is creating depth. So right now everything is in a container, and the containers are kind of like Legos. They're kind of stacked up on top of one another. So in 2020, I really see the kind of blending of containers, for lack of a better word, to use depth, to use shadows, to use color. Kind of the examples here, on the bottom center, there's this woman that's in your above the fold content, which means like when you load the screen, it's above, whatever you load is above the fold content. She is, using the rope that she's climbing from the top of the browser. So it's getting out of the actual container for the area and really utilizing space in a different way. You look to the left, you see a gentleman who's, on this kind of V-shaped piece of technology, kind of a shadow behind it. So it's using those soft shadows to create that almost 3D depth type of look. You go to the right and you see a mixture of different organic edges. You see the blueberries, all the organic, the bowl with the shadowing and the clouding kind of outlining the bottom of it. You're kind of seeing the different layers to create that depth and more interest there. Top right, you're looking at the intertwining of text and imagery. You're looking at the different shapes. You have a vector shape, you have a photo, you also have image on top, and you also have two containers, top and the white bottom, kind of intertwining all together to create one piece. So I do really think it's beyond just containers of code. It's really blending the beauty of design on a print piece into the web itself. And then the third is personalized layering. So similar to the second one, this really got me thinking on how to actually take your brand and put it in here. So I think gone are the days of just having a header and a paragraph of text and a call to action and calling it good. I think it's going to be more than that. So taking a look at the different positioning of text, like the Eat Vegan example, there's the vertical and the horizontal next to each other, giving a bit of flair into your personality for your brand. So when you're going and learning about the brand, you get that visually. So you're reading it and you're also seeing it visually. You tie it together, just strengthening it all together. You look at, the bottom right, you have a simple stock photo. Maybe it's not stock, but I would assume it is. And she's enjoying herself, but you have the little flourishes around her to really bring in that empathy and that emotion that you then connect with her. And then you read the feel the vibe header and you just feel happy. So that's really bringing in that emotional piece. You look at the left side, you look like simple e-com type things, is you have a product that's made for your home and it has the squiggly line flourish that's really calling attention to the header or to something, and then you have the steam kind of drawn up on the actual mug and the teapot there, and that's just adding a little bit more personality and depth to your visuals as well. Okay, the third is experimenting with variable experiences. So everyone generally knows what a landing page is, and putting paid efforts toward a landing page and A/B testing is something that's been thrown out for the last 5 years. But taking that beyond and actually implementing it on your actual site, I think is something we're going to see in 2020 and beyond. So your homepage could be your homepage, but I also see it being more than your homepage, having 3 different versions of your homepage, not just one. So it's not just a carousel that changes out 3 photos every month. It's actually 3 separate layouts that you can point to. A good example of this is in the bottom right. There's 2 different exact same content, exact same messaging, same copy, but different visuals, different interface, different colors to really support that A/B test truly beyond just a landing page. So you're not focusing them on one topic, you're basically A/B testing the brand visually. If you want to go to the next slide for me, Jay. this is a good example I found for this trainer, almost like Peloton-esque bike, but they had 3 different home pages. And if you look at it, the call to actions are the same. The content's different from a header 1, header 2 level, the first, like the bigger text that you see, but really they're drastically different layouts, and you get them different every time you load the page. So I really think this is a great example of what we're going to be seeing in 2020 is not only are the visuals changing and the call to actions being more descriptive and more personality brought, but it's also just going to change the way that we test. You're testing your actual main flag site to then point people to the right areas, because this is going to be a really great way to see fast what visuals make a difference, what content makes a difference, and it also helps curate your audience. So you could segment this by geography, by age, gender, anything really. You could put a set of different copy and visuals in front of them to see really how they react. So it's really creating an entry point. Granted, you don't really want to be A/B testing your product pages, because those should be consistent from page to page. So when you're buying a pair of shoes, the pair of shoes should be able to be consistently found time in and time out. So your information architecture should stay the same, but the actual interface on the pages, by all means, I see it changing a lot. So, and that's all I have for you. So
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chelsey. Very interesting visual future. All right, now I'm going to find Richard Kane and unmute him. You could probably do that. All right, so Richard's another South Florida-based guy. I get to hang out with him a lot. He's flown me in his plane. He's founded about 6 companies, including his latest, which is an airline that's going to be really, really amazing. And it's not too often that you can call someone a genius, but I'm very, authentically, I feel like I can call Richard a genius. I mean, this guy is the programmer's programmer, and he really does amazing things with technology. So I'm really interested to see what Richard is going to share with us. And Richard, you have audio?
Yes, thank you, Jay.
Okay, great, go.
So I'm breaking multiple rules. Never follow Jay and Bruce, and never do shameless product placements. There we go, that's lined up. But please, next slide. My predictions are that AI is going to spill over to the physical and the vertical in a way that will help protect the planet, save lives, and save time. But I got to tell you, I'm cheating. So when these things come true, it's not going to be a surprise. The best way to predict the future is to create it. That's been attributed to Abraham Lincoln, to Peter Drucker, and to Peter Diamandis. Since Peter's on my board, we're going to go with Peter. And next slide, please. So let's talk about Uber. Uber manages to lose $5.2 billion a quarter. I know that's a staggering number. Tesla is coming after Uber. Tesla, people don't really realize, is an AI company wrapped in a battery manufacturer and a car company. But if you follow what Tesla is doing, their cars now network together. I know this from reading their patents. They perfect their location, and they're working on autonomous driving, so robo-Uber. So basically, it's Uber without the drivers. Now, people will complain about loss of jobs and everything, but there were 3,000 sexual assaults last year on Uber. 58 people were killed in crashes, 9 murders, and you have to listen to obnoxious music half the time. It's something that has minimal maintenance, runs on battery, protects the environment, and avoids all these problems, and doesn't lose 5.2 billion is coming. So my first prediction is robo-Uber by 2022. Maybe not US, but somewhere. Next slide, please. Well, let's talk about what some of this is going to mean to your businesses. So if you are an elegant French restaurant in Manhattan, right now you can deliver to an area bounded, say, by 6th Avenue, maybe 10 square blocks, maybe a few thousand clients. Let's go to the next slide. But with autonomy around the y-axis, that same 30-minute travel time now is bounded by White Plains and Atlantic City. So think Uber Eats merged with Uber Elevate. So my prediction here is by 2021, you will be able to reduce pollution by removing cars from the road. have food delivered, or Amazon. I just flew over their shipping center in Alliance, Fort Worth, or UPS, but things delivered by drone. But let's start with food and packages. And once we've practiced on packages, it'll be people. By the way, think about what this means to urban planning or leapfrogging in infrastructure. So think of Africa and cell towers versus copper wires for a second. We'll come back to that. And next slide. So, automation, we're heading for a point where AI can autonomously operate a vehicle. And you will see beyond line of sight autonomy for drones in 2020, where these things are just flying themselves. Or if you can look at the Vision Jet, that plane can now land itself at the touch of a button. It's called safe return. And next slide. So you take these things and you make them electric, and I will predict that the first all-electric scheduled airline will happen in 2020. Oddly enough, it's on 50-year-old retrofitted seaplanes. Harbor Air, right now, as we're having this call, is doing their inaugural flight. That's an easy prediction. And next slide. So you take electric, you take autonomy. This is from Airbus. You'll take a 45-minute drive, turn it into a 10-minute flight. And my prediction here is you'll see Kitty Hawk operating in New Zealand with people doing this vertical takeoff and landing electric, non-polluting in 2020, probably first quarter. And next slide. So what I'm about to talk about next is the culmination of a 25-year NASA program. There's roughly 20 years between the prototype on the left and the production jets on the right. And next slide. And so what we have is a change in the speed of travel. When we went from horses to cars, we got 75 miles an hour, and cars to props, 200 miles an hour, and props to jets, 500 miles an hour. And then hub and spoke, 9/11, TSA deregulation, we're back down to an average travel speed of 75 miles an hour. On top of which, we have an underutilized infrastructure of 5,400 airports. Less than 1% of their capacity is tapped. So my next prediction here is that this year you will see point-to-point service where you're not connecting, and will bring the average speed of travel back to 300 miles an hour. And this one's easy because this is Verijet, the airline that Jay referenced earlier. And next slide. So we've talked about speed of travel, we've talked about carbon footprint, we haven't talked about lives yet. So drones will save thousands of lives annually by 2021. Again, easy prediction, there's already been 25,000 of these deliveries in Africa. So you can move medicine around on a 30-minute flight that would otherwise be a 5-hour round trip on a truck because there's no infrastructure. And next slide. And today, domestically, we do power line, we do bridge, we do cell tower infrastructure inspections by drone, saving a dozen lives a year. People fall off these towers. On the top right is a drone that is from BNSF Railway. It patrols the railway tracks, preventing derailments. The bottom right is a dedicated organ transplant helicopter for emergency transplants. And one of our investors, Scott Struthers of Elephant Corporation, has drones flying around Africa, finding poachers, protecting rhinos and elephants. So again, easy life-saving prediction. And next slide. So you'll see AI protect the planet, save lives, and reduce our travel time. That's my presentation.
Thanks, Richard. Always fascinating.
Tough to do in 5 minutes.
That's awesome. All right, Mr. Jaffe's up next. So Joe's another guy that, we've been hanging around conferences for 10, 12 years, amazing podcaster. He's in his third startup called HMS Beagle and his fifth book. And these books like Life After the 30-Second Spot, Flip the Funnel, Join the Conversation. I think I was one of these little pictures where he crowdsourced the pictures for the new book to pre-build enthusiasm for it. Joe's really been ahead of the curve in predicting what's coming in digital, and thrilled to find out what's next. Joe, you got audio?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Jay, for the introduction. And, as always, like an agency guy that I am, I'm not going to listen to the brief, and I'm going to break some of the rules. So I guess my first prediction is that there are going to be more predictions, right? I mean, we love these predictions at the end of the year, and we love proclamating about the death of whatever the case may be. But the fact is, we always witness life after, and we witness an end. So that would be the first prediction. The second prediction is probably that Mitch Joel is going to become the new John Wanamaker based on his quote, or maybe the new Steve Bannon based on his conspiracy theories. It's a little bit interesting from Mitch, but I would probably say that it's more like 99.9% of our data is wasted, and we know exactly what percentage. I think the third prediction, really, what I wanted to do today, in all seriousness, is create a little bit of context, a little bit of why should we care? So what? What's in it for me? And so, this does come down to what I've been writing about and where my focus has been. And that's, the prediction is that we're seeing, the rise of what I call the fourth industrial revolution, the entrepreneurial revolution. We're witnessing the demise of companies, of brands, of entire sectors or categories. As I often say, when we talk about digital disruption, if you come from a family of 3 generations of toll booth operators, you're basically shit out of luck, because we've witnessed within weeks, months, a disappearance of toll booths, all in favor of this new electronic digital solution. So if you go to the next slide, and you'll get the cadence from me, Jay, I don't believe that companies are built to last anymore. Even going back to Jim Collins' fantastic book, right? He said that visionary companies would not always be visionary companies. Companies, I believe, are in fact built to suck, which you'll see in the next slide. And even though, there's a little tagline, the key to success is to suck less. The fact is, we're witnessing the impact of all of these predictions converging on the failing and the disintermediation and the undermining of entire business models. But this is not about doom and gloom, right? This is about what is the way forward? How do these predictions, how does technology come together? And so, if I was to talk to you about predictions, it would be about these 4 pillars. I call these the 4 pillars of growth, and I'll just touch on them, 30 seconds on each one. The first is digital disruption. And my point here is very simple. When we talk about AI and IoT, etc., if we're not disrupting the status quo, then we're not using digital the way digital was intended. So if anything, I've kind of flipped this now, and I say it's time to disrupt digital, because digital always was the ultimate promise and potential. It was the leveling of playing fields and game changers. And like, even if you look at Twitter, it's just become nothing more than a broadcast platform. So we need to disrupt digital. The second is customer obsession. And I actually think that we should stop talking about customer service and customer experience and customer centricity. We need to be obsessed. We need to be obsessed on retention as the new acquisition. We've got to be obsessed on our customers, because if we aren't and we don't take them for granted, we are truly going to be dead on arrival. And that brings us to talent resurrection, because we need to be obsessed equally on our internal customer, on our employees. I even go so far as to say we should ban the word employee, because we need to be thinking of our talent. I mean, I think maybe it was David Meerman Scott who spoke about humanity. We've got to think about this perfect combination between technology and humanity. And as long as creativity prevails, and as long as human beings are still part of the equation, before the singularity takes over, if we cannot attract and retain the best and the brightest, and if we cannot turn our talent into entrepreneurs inside our organization, again, we're going to struggle to move forward. And then the fourth is corporate citizenship. And I truly believe if we want to save this planet, if we want to create real differentiation, if we want millennials and Gen Zers to buy us for a reason, that reason has to be because we are helping save this planet, because we are responsible corporate citizens. The Business Roundtable recently came out and said the primary goal of a corporation is not to satisfy external stakeholders or shareholders. It is to satisfy all stakeholders, and that is employees and its customers, and it's an environment and its communities, etc. So the next slide talks about, again, why does this matter? It matters because if a company is not growing, then a company is in fact dying. So Jay, if you go to the next slide, please. I believe the prime directive, to use a little bit of Star Trek geekiness, is growth or a return to growth. If you are a large legacy corporation or brand, you've probably stopped growing. You need to grow. And growth is not just about growing out. It's not just about market share and profitability. It's also about growing up and being much more responsible and much more humble and much more aware of your surroundings. So if you go to the next slide, my final two slides, I think that ultimately when we look at all of these predictions, every prediction you've heard today is both a lifesaver and a game changer and full of crap. And why do I say that? Because at the end of the day, every prediction is not going to work for every brand. Sometimes these predictions are going to be what I call the worst of the new, and sometimes they will be the best of the new. If there is an ultimate prediction here from me, it is about the elevation of strategy. Instead of tactics in search of strategy or solution to a non-existent problem, what we need to see is strategy. We need to see context. We need to see a why. And so I've come up with a survival planning canvas, right? Recognizing that our time on this earth is limited and corporations and brands have a shelf life and then some kind of a growth plan. And if you would like to get a copy of these canvases and plans, my final slide, all you have to do is text 10 golden rules to 66866. So ultimately, I thank you, Jay, and everyone else for the opportunity. I'm always energized when I'm around like-minded thinkers and fantastic pundits and thought leaders and futurists, as you've heard from today, and you will no doubt hear from. But remember, in this case, strategy and context is king. You are overloaded. We are overloaded with all this input and stimulus. Make sure it is the right idea for you at the right time to solve the right problem. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Joe. Always awesome and extremely well spoken. And without further delay, I'm going to try and give unmute to Peter Shankman, who sent me his slides from Bangkok. Where do we find you today, Peter?
I'm back in New York, and I want to thank you for having me on exactly at the time this webinar was supposed to end. I'm sure everyone has stuck around long and hard to hear me, so this should be great.
Well, we tried to. Most people did a good job getting time, but so
I blame Chelsey. It's just easy that way.
Peter's founded several businesses, but the one most of us probably remember him for, because every day we get 3 emails from HARO, help a reporter out. Peter was such a great resource to so many journalists around the world that they were asking him constantly for experts on topics that he started sending out an email saying, here's a topic that you could get covered in the media for. So if you haven't seen Help a Reporter Out, Peter founded it. He sold it over 5 years ago now, and has written several books and speaks, and another one of our rock stars. And with that, I'll turn it over to him.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am going to be much quicker. I only have a few slides. You can go to the first one if you want. Essentially, I come from a different track here. A lot of what I'm talking about is, I can't even see if my slides are up. All I see is text 10 golden rules to 66866. So I'm not sure if my slides are up, but assuming they are, there we go. Okay, so next 20 years, that's me and a camel making the same face. I met him 2 weeks ago in Abu Dhabi. We've become surprisingly close. You can go to the next slide. The neurodiversity is key. What is neurodiversity? So I run the #1 podcast on iTunes called Faster Than Normal, which focuses on ADD and ADHD and neurodiversity as a gift instead of a curse. And one of the things we found, I wrote a best-selling book for Random House called Faster Than Normal as well. And one of the things we found is that 25% of the workforce in the next 10 years, as well as the purchasing economy, is going to be neurodiverse. What is that? ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum, executive function, things of that model. If you do not know how to sell and how to hire to these people, you are going to be left by the wayside. I have found myself in the past year being brought out to major companies, large fast food chains, I went to a fast food chain who said we need to understand how to sell to people like this because they're not coming to our stores. And I said, that's because you have 133 items on your menu above me, and it includes advertisements, and I want to shoot myself in the head when I see that. If you go to In-N-Out Burger, it has hamburger, cheeseburgers, fries, and shakes. So that's where I'm going to go right now. So we need to understand how to sell to those people and how to hire to those people, because the concept of neurodiverse, something that we used to keep in our head and not talk about, is now something we wear on our shirts as a badge of honor. And we need to, people need to understand that the neurodiverse workforce and the neurodiverse customer base has a lot of money, and more than ever before, they're being diagnosed and want to be treated not differently, but in a way that it works for them, right? So 133 items on a menu above my head, not so good. So companies who understand their audience's brains as well as their wallets are going to win the next 10 years. Next slide, please. What we're going to look at also is the next slide. Did we go there yet? I can't tell. It's running a little long. Okay, you know what? I'll use my slides. What the heck? Next slide. Exit stage left boomers. Generation Z and Alpha really will take firm control. There was a tweet yesterday, I think a couple of days ago, from Bette Midler, where she was, and I love Bette, but where she said she showed a picture of three girls at a museum, and it had they were all on their phones. And she said, "What's wrong with this picture?" And someone responded, "No, well, what's wrong with this picture is the fact that the boomer doesn't realize that the museum has an app instead of actual people to show you around the museum, because boomers decided that museums weren't worth the money and cut the funding." So, you know, it's kind of at the point where they are going away. Apathy is decreasing. So you're looking at Generation Zs and Alphas as understanding that apathy is going to kill them, not just figuratively, but literally kill them, right? The apathy of plastic in the oceans, the apathy of carbon in our air, the apathy of greenhouse gases, things like that are going to literally kill them. And so because of that, they are starting to spend money on companies that get that and want to see them stay alive. So that's a win for everyone. The kids stay alive, they can spend the money on your brand. You can go to the next slide, which is the concept that we're going to start doing more things at home. This doesn't mean we're not going to go outside more, but if you look at Peloton, and I'm not talking about the really creepy girl who had to be rescued. I am a Peloton junkie. I'm actually wearing their shirt today. They don't pay me, but I have drank the Kool-Aid. I am on that bike at 4 a.m. every single morning. I run 5 different Peloton groups on Facebook. They have changed fitness. They have changed the world. They will continue to do that. But so will Mirror and other brands like that. Subscription prices will drop as the barrier to entries drop. And what we're going to find is that more people are going to do things like that. So this concept of Soul Cycle and Flywheel are going to go away. Why should I have to go to a studio and be surrounded by 20 women who go woo all the time when I could just do that on my bike at home and not have to deal with people? I can also do it without having to put on a shirt. So we're going to see subscription models will still be strong, but for doing more of things. So less outsourcing. So Blue Apron, things like that are not going to be so popular, but rather the concept of doing things, right? So exercise, learning, we'll see the concept of privacy parties, where people are actually coming over to an event for a party or an event, and you have to actually leave your phones outside. You'll be scanned, no devices, right? You go inside, do whatever you want, as long as there's no phone there. So you can go to the next slide there. The sharing is carrying. The economy is going to grow, but regulation is really going to start to kick in. Uber just got their asses handed to them for the 4th time in a row in London. We're seeing the same thing happen in New York and San Francisco. De Blasio, for all the horrible things he's doing, and he's like that video game character that keeps walking into the wall and just can't figure out how to walk. He's actually going after companies like Uber and companies like Airbnb. You know, I live in a gorgeous apartment building on the 56th floor. I own my apartment. There's one other person on my floor who owns my apartment. The rest are empty. They're either owned by the Chinese or they're owned by people who are trying to outsource them and Airbnb them, which is really frustrating when I'm walking outside with my daughter and I see 4 people on my floor, none of whom I know. So that's starting to get, New York's starting to pass a lot of regulation to kick their asses with that. The people themselves who are renting are looking at upwards of like $10,000 fines per shot. So that's going to be big. You're going to get, that's going to be huge. This is, you keep moving forward, you can move backwards because we haven't done this one. Can you, let me see where yeah, okay, debating the outcome of the election. So socials need to get smacked down and become more powerful. Personally, you know, if Elizabeth Warren wins, we're going to see, it's going to take years. This is not 2020, this is 2024, 26, 28. But if Democrats get back into power, we'll see socials start to get smacked down a little bit. If the current administration stays in power, we'll see socials do whatever they want because the current administration doesn't care about that. My prediction most likely is it's going to get smacked down while somehow still becoming more powerful, just confusing us even more. But someone in the beginning said we don't own our data. It's all on the dark web. Of course it's on the dark web. I can go find my name on the dark web and find my own credit card. It doesn't matter anymore. We don't care about that. Privacy died 30 years ago. And then finally, lastly, here's a truly accurate prediction of 2020 elections, and you can just go right from there because that's really where I think we're going to go. No one knows what's going to happen, especially none of us. And so I think that if nothing else, let's just try to have fun, be a little nice to each other, and not kill each other. And then throw that last slide up there, because I'm just really freaking proud of this one. This is me skydiving over the Great Pyramids of Giza about 3 weeks ago, and that was just the shit. That was really awesome. So I'm at Peter Shankman on all the Pelotons, or all the socials, even Peloton. And if you're in New York, I welcome a 4 a.m. run or coffee with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Peter. Thank you. Sorry for the technical quirks here.
All good, buddy.
Your slides are sort of taking over my whole computer here. So I'm going to try and get out of them. There we go. And we'll go to Frankie next. Okay, so we got slides.
Can you hear me, Jay?
I can.
Sweet.
So Frankie's a speaker, author, entrepreneur, and healer. He's actually a shaman, and so every prediction webinar needs a shaman. And he's also a super smart marketer when it comes to professional services. And so, Frankie, welcome.
Jay, thank you so much for having me. And firstly, I have to say that, Peter, you were awesome. And for me, I listened to all my Audible books at double speed, so that was totally normal for me. But for the rest of you, that was probably super, super fast. And this presentation would probably be cooler if I knew I could do Star Wars references like Mitch or funny cartoons like Joe. Having said that, 10-year-old me predicted we would have flying cars by the year 2000. So rather than make a bunch of predictions that I couldn't really validate, what I wanted to show you guys is people who are really ahead of the curve today, especially in the marketing sense, and would be the most benefit to you to totally model. So the first one of these is omnipresence, and that's really, really being everywhere. Can you skip to the next slide, Jay? Jay. So yeah, so I got a chance to work with the top lawyer in Jacksonville. What's really interesting about the data you see in front of you is they show, you know, where do you trust your information from? And I have a very different opinion than what you see on this chart in front of you. And when I worked with this lawyer in Jacksonville, he's the type that you see, you know, if you drive 5 miles down the road, you're going to pass 17 of his billboards, hear his commercial on the radio while you're driving, go home, see him on TV, find him in a Google search, literally everywhere. And it was really interesting because he had brought me in for a consulting project, and they were running the same TV commercials that were having mega success, probably like 100 miles up the road in a completely different town where nobody had heard of them before. And it wasn't really having the same effect because he wasn't really everywhere and he didn't have all the brand recognition. And so really there's a massive, massive, massive benefit to being everywhere. And one of the things that I think most people don't realize is this effect is way, way cheaper to replicate digitally. And so just to give you a quick overview of how myself and my clients are using this is, you know, we're putting a little bit of Google and Facebook retargeting code on our websites, which allows us to be, you know, once you click on our website once, all of a sudden, you know, we build fans really quickly because we're everywhere in your world all at once. And Google shows on all kinds of third-party websites and apps. So imagine somebody showed a little bit of interest to you and now they see you 100 different independent places. That builds trust so much faster than any one of these sources individually. Next slide, Jay. Second prediction. So if you guys haven't showered for 3 days because you've watched all of Game of Thrones to see who's going to die next, or rewatched Friends to see how many times Ross and Rachel are going to break out or break up for the 1,000th time, turns out you're completely normal. Binge watching is totally a new thing, and it's so ridiculously common, but it's for many people not changing the way they're doing business, and it really should be. And a couple of people that I know, self included, that are really ahead of the curve are using this to set up so that, especially on YouTube, that people can binge watch your content or whatever they need to consume, so they can watch 8, 9, 10 videos in a row of who you are and what you're up to. And it's really the fastest way to go from I'd never heard of you 5 minutes ago to I'm interested in becoming your lifelong customer or client because, you know, 10 videos in a row or whatever. So if you're not set up for binge watching, you really need to think about doing that, because that's how people are consuming content today. Next slide, Jay. Yeah, and actually, I just wanted to show you really quickly that 76% of people have stayed up all night to watch a show, to binge watch. So it's more normal than not normal. Next slide. Third one, last one I have for you guys is in every market that I work, especially the offline ones where lawyers, realtors, medical doctors, accountants. In California alone, there's one lawyer for every 175 people, which includes men, women, and child, and they're cranking out 40,000 new ones a year. And I think this is really more of a call than ever to go back to the basics, to stand out and to know thy competition and to know thy customer, because it's getting louder and more congested, and standing out and having a reason to be intentionally different than everybody else in a way that's different and more meaningful to your customer or client, I think is more important than it's ever been, because we're living in probably the noisiest advertising, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. So those are my big three: is be everywhere, and especially you can do this digitally, very intelligent way. Set yourself up for binge watching and find a way to stand out from the noise.
Thank you, Frankie. Awesome as expected. And last but certainly not least, Dennis Yu. So I've seen Dennis present, probably a dozen times, and he's the Facebook guru. Like, he is, like, for 7, 8, 9 years, he's been teaching us how to do Facebook advertising since way before they even had conversion tracking. And he founded a company called Blitz Metrics to do it for us and teach folks how to do it. And interestingly, he worked for Yahoo in search, and he traveled all around the world speaking for Yahoo. So Dennis, you have audio?
Yeah, you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
And you know why people call me a guru?
No.
It's because they can't spell Charlotte.
So
no, I'm kidding. Anyway,
Dennis,
can you give me screen access?
Yeah, sure. Let me just try and do that.
So I was in London yesterday, and let's see, how do I record the screen? Yes. Capture screen. Uh-oh. Need to come here and accept permissions. I really want to show you. Wait, I think it's this one here. I'll be able to record until it is.
You have to accept.
I might have to come. I think I might have to come in and out real quick. I'll be right back.
Big thank you to everyone for sticking around. Sorry we ran a little bit late, and we'll definitely make all the slides and the video audio available after the fact. Okay, I see Dennis is back. Dennis has audio now.
So other presenters have talked about AI and moving towards, Uber and recognizing people and, big data and all these like brave new world kinds of situations. And I want to give you my prediction of where I think things are heading and where we're going to be able to fight this beast. And this is not the kind of viewpoint that Facebook wants to hear. I've gotten in trouble. Same thing from my friends in search. So I, hate on everybody equally. So I was mentioning yesterday, I had breakfast in London. I'm actually in Phoenix now with my friends at Facebook. And just in the last week, I've been in the Middle East. I've been in Europe. I've been in Asia, seeing what is going on. And you might notice that I've been posting on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and blogs. And you guys notice how these guys will recognize who you are. Like here on Instagram, they'll say, hey, would you like to tag your friend? Or, hey, is this where you are? Or 15 of your friends have checked in. And one of the networks that people don't seem to talk about, which is super powerful, is Amazon, right? Amazon knows your purchasing behavior. And has anyone here used Amazon Photos? This is a sleeper. And let me just give you quick context in my remaining 3 minutes. So I went to the Great Barrier Reef and I did some scuba diving, and I brought my iPhone and it shorted out, and I wasn't worried about it because I have everything backed up through Amazon with all my pictures and videos through Apple iCloud. I've got the Google Drive that's got everything in here. I have Dropbox, like I've got everything backed up with 5 different services. But what I noticed is that all of them are able to recognize people and places and events, right? And check this out. On the people side, it's auto tagging these different people. So I could look at, Dr. Robert Lyons, who I was with in London the last couple of days, and it's recognizing, it's actually pretty smart. Alexa appears dumb, but the AI behind this is super smart. Now, the reason why this is so important, and this is one of those, fight the machine back or use the same jujitsu kind of power on them, is that in the same way they can make ad recommendations, I can use this from a marketing standpoint. Because when all of these pictures and images, videos and moments are being recorded on my phone, for example, it's being pushed to our team in the Philippines. So we got 100 people in the Philippines, and what they're doing, excuse me, is they're collecting these bits of media. Maybe I'm using Peter Shankman's service that he found at HARO, or like here, right? I was on CNN Live talking about what's going to happen with Cambridge Analytica, or I'm whatever at the Temple of Hercules, which is 7,500 years old. There's all these different things. All of this stuff's being categorized by who it's with and where it is, and then this allows us to use the AI plus our network of people, whether it's the people on your team or the people that you hire through Fiverr, or you have a virtual assistant, to be able to process all this stuff to amplify personal brands. Because consumers are allergic to advertising, right? So the way you get around that is you have these stories, these moments that are collected from you, from your figurehead, from your client, from whoever it is, to let them tell the story for you, let them do the marketing for you. And what I predict in 2020 is that as these systems get smarter, the only way to win is when you leverage their AI to do this marketing for you, and then be able to do all these items like what we teach for Fiverr, for personal branding, for driving sales, for doing all these sorts of deals, and it's going to move through this framework. You're going to have goals, content, and targeting, which is kind of your filter of what this content stands for, what does it mean. You're going to drive it through an asset production, identification, editing kind of stage. This is where you would normally have a graphics editor, video editor. The volume here requires, I believe, a very tight process and lots of lower wage workers, if you will. Distribution, whether it's for search or YouTube or social or email, and then amplification on the ad side. And what I found just from testing in the last year is that when you run this kind of system and you push out the same content, so here's me on LinkedIn, when I'm pushing out the same content on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatnot, you can see literally like here's a video that got cross-posted. Then it sends a strong signal to the search engines. It sends a strong signal to social because they see it in multiple places, and it starts to dominate things like Knowledge Panel. It starts to show up more in search. And I'm sure, Jay, you would recognize and validate this as well. When your content is in multiple places, it creates more authority. It generates more domain authority, more diversity. So I consider this like the ultimate SEO hidden kind of strategy, where when you have content that's in multiple formats that is then pushed through editors that automatically categorize through the algorithm, and then VAs that are coming in and editing this, so that you can make snippets and stories and this kind of thing. This is going to be the key to marketing in a non-advertising kind of world. So I hope you guys find that interesting.
My theory on that from the old world, we used to do advertising for McDonald's restaurants, and we'd launch a campaign on Thursday, so that like if we had a new Happy Meal, we'd be promoting it for the weekend. And the franchisees always wanted to know what works, the TV, the radio, or the billboards. And I didn't know, but I do know for sure that like if you heard a radio commercial and saw a billboard, it wasn't like 1 + 1, it was like 7. Like it just entered brain at a much higher level. So I believe in that multiplication of message for sure.
Yeah. Feed the algorithm. It's like short circuiting it.
That's great. If I could give you, one more prediction, just, hone it to Facebook and Instagram, the same advertising platform. What's happening there, and what could we all do in 2020 to take advantage of the platform?
All the people that are complaining about losing their reach and about the algorithm forcing you to advertise, all that reach is going somewhere else. And for every loser, there's more, it's like the winners get stronger. So this is my friend Colin Wayne at Redline Steel, and he's going live all the time, and you'll see that he's constantly getting, like I went live with him a few days ago in Huntsville. We had 10,000 comments on the live that we went. So when you produce long form video and you get all these comments, this is what's sucking away the reach and engagement from everyone else, right? The trouble with capitalism is that there's winners. So with Facebook, don't complain. Instead, figure out what are guys like Colin doing so that you can get the same kind of reach. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he's in home furnishings. This applies in every single vertical.
That's awesome. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for bringing us home, and thank you to all of our experts. As I mentioned, we'll definitely send this out to everybody. We'll make the recording and the slides available, and I hope everyone has a great holiday season and can take 5 or 6 or 7 of these ideas and really make 2020 an awesome year. Thank everyone so much.
Thank you, guys.
What is up, guys?